the appropriate place to solve that.
It would
I
be
guess
someplace else.
I guess it would be done the next time we do a master plan, but,
Yeah, I would think that definitely sits someplace. I agree with you, that's an important item to define. I don't believe it's part of the CDA bylaws where that would be defined. But I hear you, Pete, we need, yeah.
I think it's the
We need
plan
clarity
commission
on
with
that.
the village that would make that determination based on statute.
All right,
well, then we should have a list somewhere, other things that need clarification. Because that's what this is trying to do, right? This document, one of its, the main objective is to clarify things.
well, yes, clarify things.
This is the place to clarify what I think in the past have been festering, misunderstandings. Then we ought to have a list somewhere of fixing those somewhere else.
But again, bylaws are,
I understand.
again, our rules of the roads specific to us, so, and some of the things you're bringing up are very valid, but they're sort of, I think they're bigger beyond just CDA process,
Bylaws.
overall village,
I agree 100%.
yeah.
But nobody else understands that they're a problem, I don't think, until it gets there, and then there we are. So I'm just saying, somewhere else,
Yep,
we ought to, at the right time, but not just wait for it to happen to us again. Take care of some of these things.
yep, agreed, yeah.
Pete, I've made a note and I will add it to the list.
Can you add the matrix from the last?
That's already on it.
Okay. That was the extent of your, any other,
Yes.
Andrea, any other?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that was my,
All right. Trustee Rozak, so you had two, again, I think this is sort of did we address your first one, or?
I think so, so.
Oh, sorry, you were speaking specifically within.
So for 2B, is that, yeah, provide on rezoning and redevelopment. I would like to hear from staff. I see your comment. My remembrance, like from experience, was that that we really did focus as a redevelopment authority on tax increment districts. Like, we're the financing tool, body that does the financing or the conduit for the financing. So I don't know if that's right or not, but that's what I just wanted to hear, kind of discussion and maybe staff's input on. I guess it just ties back to that. Is it village-wide that we make all these recommendations to do zoning changes, or is it more, from my experience, it was always more, okay, we're gonna do a large city or village, TID, like TID 1, say, for instance, if it's a multi-project, okay? And in that larger area, like in the city of Milwaukee, it would have been like Park East or something, a large area, and in there you would talk about rezoning and environmental cleanup, or whatever had to be done, and you'd make recommendations then to the plan commission, the board and plan commission. But is it for properties outside of your areas where you're financing? I can see you looking at them for potential, you always say, oh, well, for future efforts. But until you actually adopt a TID or something that is in the realm of the redevelopment authority, they used to call them renewal boundaries. So you adopt a redevelopment plan for an area that doesn't require a TID, so they used to be called renewal boundaries. So those are all what the redevelopment authority did. They would say certain areas, and then they would talk about rezoning it, cleaning it up, getting grants, whatever it may be. But I just don't remember going bonkers at the redevelopment authority, village-wide or city-wide.
So you're saying, is to be too broad with respect to our
I feel
recommendations
it
on?
kinda is, but I would like to hear from others that have worked in other, or may have more experience with other redevelopment authorities. I just have it from Milwaukee for 10 years, but there might be others that do it differently.
Do you wanna go first?
And we talked about this at staff
Yeah.
before this as well, and my experience has been that the CDA would step in within a TID or within a redevelopment area,
Right.
like you're mentioning, but other things that happen for rezoning would go to the plan commission,
Me
in my
too.
experience in West Dallas.
And there may be situations where you're proactively looking at an area to
That's
create a TID, and so
Yeah,
it
that's
does
okay.
apply.
Of course.
But, yeah, you're not making recommendations on things that are not outside,
Mhm.
you know. That, I think it's just a common understanding, for
Right,
us,
it's
it
like
was
a
a common
separation.
understanding.
Right, we might not need to, for the purpose of bylaws, it may not need to be called out in that,
I'd like to clarify it though.
it's a function, it's a process that the CDA would discuss in being proactive
Mhm.
and explore and sort of start a conversation about. And within a TID, obviously, or a redevelopment zone, or even in relation to a strategic plan. So it would come up, but it's not an essential duty or authority. And is the bylaws what we're trying to stick to duty and authority of how we operate, how we're set up to make that happen.
Yeah, clarifying, like Mr. Petrie said, Member Petrie, you know, we don't wanna vanilla it down, so I do believe this is the time to discuss it and to really understand what our role is. I mean, that's the purpose of the bylaws, right?
Couldn't you say, CDA makes recommendations to rezone, as it relates to existing or prospective TIDs? And then that kinda covers both.
Yeah, redevelopment areas, you don't have to
Yeah.
say
Say
TIDs.
TID even, just say
Yeah,
that's the
development, that's the
financing.
broader.
Yeah.
And again, this is we're not, I don't see us taking any authority here. We're
Right.
providing recommendations to another body, so we're not
But
That's
let
why-
me give
deciding
you an example though.
anything.
Let me give you an example. Say, for instance, there was a development proposed, on Wilson Drive, or on, I'm just gonna
Let's
pick,
not pick.
okay, let's not pick that one. Just- Yeah, it's not
Definitely
developed,
not pick.
and that's not in the central business district. Okay, say, we talked about rezoning, the little parcel for
Yes,
business at
yep.
one point. I don't know, pick
Yes.
something that's not in the direct business district, right? So
Oh,
anyways,
okay.
that's what I'm trying to do, is just somewhere else.
Okay.
And, I don't feel, unless we were thinking of doing a renewal plan or a TIF there, that CDA would be the one to be making recommendations on it. It would really be coming from Plan Commission. And that, I think that's how it kind of occurs.
Yep. We
Right?
agree, I wouldn't steer here,
100%, right?
or I wouldn't steer here.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get a little, I want everyone to be on the
So
same
what's
page.
the solution? Yeah.
Well, as
I
it relates to
agree.
redevelopment, I think it kinda covers, is like a general way of doing that we can all, it pertains to this body, you know?
Let's see.
Yeah, I don't think
We
there's any,
wouldn't even bring it here.
yeah,
Well, I'm just sharing, like, it
No,
would
it's
never even enter into my mind to bring it
But in the
here.
past,
But
the CBA has, you know, through some of the efforts, made some recommendations on parcels like that.
I don't,
I don't know, which parcel are
I,
you referring to?
I can't think of an example.
Let me add something here. There was a situation where, this must have been 10 years ago, when it was obvious just from some of the redevelopment investigations, et cetera, that people were going to underutilize properties along Oakland Avenue by putting in one-story buildings, or making fake second stories, look like it was second stories but without function. And the CDA, through its monitoring of redevelopment and its opportunities, saw that as basically a loophole for underutilization of important property. And I believe, I can't remember all this, Eric, I don't know whether you were involved in this or not, but basically, I think it was not in connection with the master plan that the CDA initiated a recommendation to rezone that stretch along Oakland Avenue. I think it was along the non-dense areas of it, to require second stories. And that, I'm not sure what the process was. I'm sure it involved the Plan Commission. But there was nobody else looking out for that.
Well, that's,
I'd like to interject something on that one, since I've been around a while. I would think
So-
that, I would
so
think.
I
Wait,
think
Pete,
just a
Pete,
minute.
Guy, can you hear Guy?
Yeah,
Okay,
Okay. I think one of the things that happened back then was that the village manager took it upon himself to recognize the problem and then interjected the use of the CDA. And maybe at the time, it should have been an interjection of the plan commission.
Right, that's what
So-
that may well have been the case.
And I think that's what probably happened.
And it was
Just remember
probably
that it happened.
It's not the end of the world or anything, but
Yeah,
that's
it would have
probably
been
what
both.
happened.
I would be engaging both of you.
Yeah,
right,
I would be engaging you from looking at
Yeah.
perspective development, and I'd be engaging them because
Right.
it's important that you guys have a mutual understanding as to why you're doing what you're doing.
Right.
I am very comfortable from a staff perspective, looking at those things. I don't wanna speak for you, Bart, but at least from working with Bart, we're comfortable in knowing who we should be talking to
mhm.
Yeah.
and engaging. And maybe it just didn't raise a red flag with us because we're doing that all the time.
Yeah, so does it need to be in the bylaws? That's what I'm going back to.
Well, let's
It
see
does
what-
if you guys feel it needs to be.
Well,
We're
just-
okay over here.
What can we, does anyone know what we're recommending? So what's being recommended was the village ordinance doesn't require a recommendation from the CDA. This is to be, so maybe perhaps the line should be limited to redevelopment and the word rezoning deleted. That was that's the question that I had posed. So it would say, provide,
Right, that would be,
recommendations on redevelopment.
well, I guess in that, we don't have to have bylaws that account for every request that comes to the
Right,
CDA
yeah.
from the village manager as a strategic request, you know, so I'm comfortable, with that staff recommendation.
Which was
It's in the,
this one.
it's in the
Okay.
notes.
Okay.
It was an offer.
yep,
So no
Okay.
changes? It's-
No, no
or-
change.
Limited to redevelopment.
Oh, limited
Yeah,
to redevelopment,
yes,
okay.
yeah.
okay,
Okay, all right.
yes.
Okay, so, oh, did I not put,
I'm also okay taking out the whole thing, because I think it's understood, but
where would, I missed the
what's that?
It's
number
just
four.
mirroring that row.
CIS to be, maybe it should be, okay. Does the, pursuant to the bylaws for B, so we're looking at 4B now, approval, okay, of TID creation, development agreements, and other TID expenditures. I say, does this pertain to only land that's receiving financial assistance or located within the TID? Or is it any land in the village? Is that, didn't we just go over that?
Yep.
Yep, okay, so we're done with 8.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And we're gonna put in your, was there any recommended language
No.
change? Okay. Number 9, need to confirm via minutes, and this was the one, I know you attached the minutes, there is another set of minutes. So for, when we adopted, is it the joint meeting? The ones you came from, or the minutes you had were before my time, cause they had Patrick Lenane on there. And the minutes I'm talking about were, when we redid the facade and the loan program, which was in 2016, in November. So,
Hope he's okay.
I
You
know.
okay, Pete? What's going on there?
Sounds like some back.
There's one way going down, move another way.
All right.
Sounds like a
So
bear.
what I'm hoping to clarify is, and I think it might be in the minutes, it's definitely should be in the motions. Because in the motion, I think we had a long discussion about what happens if the maximum limit wants to be changed for any of those programs. And I believe the motion will clarify it for you, I just didn't have time to rummage through all of my files, but I remember clarifying it and saying, you know, what had to come back to the board, and I don't think it was like, we can't dissolve the program. And I remember, cause I wanted to be able to have, you know, the ultimate final control over switching the funds and using it for something else, that didn't make it. But we did have something on the maximum limits and the, what was the second thing I listed on here? The program, and any program changes, like you actually went in and you changed the program document. So anyways, I just wanna make that clear, and I didn't know if we needed to specify.
But where would that go in, I don't understand how that relates to the bylaws.
It's in here, it talks about, approval by the village board. So, it lists the things that need approval by the village board, that, of CDA actions, and it's just not in there. So it doesn't say anything about the facade or the business grant program.
And I'm not sure I'd want that in the,
Yeah.
again, in the bylaws.
Oh, that's a
Yeah, as
good.
far as bylaws, just.
I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right, it's something the board, you know, again, that's,
Where
it's
else
an
do you?
sort of, those kinds of things are gonna happen all the time, right?
Right,
Where there's gonna be requirement for approval or whatever, but that's not at the bylaws level. It's at,
the program.
because
level.
again, this is this document is forever, so this, for example, as you said, just happened. So it's in another place that sort of clarifies, if we do make change to that program, we would need to get
Right.
village board.
Okay.
It would go in the program document.
I would think it
When we
should.
looked at it, we thought it was a program document thing, but we wanted,
Yes.
I'll still try to find the minutes. We
Try to
thought we
find the
found it.
minutes.
There
because
might be other
here's
But
where
we
I
didn't
get
think it was
confused.
applicable to
I
the
don't think
bylaws.
it's bylaws.
Maybe it's
I
more
think
general is what I'm saying, it doesn't
Okay.
need to be like facade grant, it can be, so right now it's just saying, we as a board member here, I get to approve, land acquisition, approval of TIDs, comes to the board, development agreements, TID expenditures.
When you say the board, you're saying the CDA board or the village?
No, the
board?
village-
We have to go to the
village
village
board.
board for.
Yeah, okay, and, issue a debt, propose contracts, and amendments and deletions to the bylaws, but I think that there needs to be a bullet that says, and other program, something about the programs, because we're gonna have more, and I wanna make sure, it doesn't have to say facade grant, but and any other programs that are applicable per the program document, or something like that, just to state that there are some other functions that the board approves, that the CDA does, that in its programs. So,
The board does approve CDA programs,
Right.
the creation and the change.
Yep.
So it doesn't have to say the word facade, but I just know, and I also get lost because I don't know what the right document is to then be very specific, but like that one clause that I'm telling you about, we're all probably not in the same recollection, and where do we collect those so that it doesn't get lost?
But don't you have, you have a facade program with specifics behind it, and limitations. And so if we follow that program, you don't need to go to the board, but if you were to change that program, you need to go to the board. I mean, that's,
I think it was the only reason I'm
Yeah.
asking for staff to look at the motion is
I
my
think it's in there,
recollection
yeah.
might be wrong, so that's why I want
Yeah.
just someone else to look at it. But I believe that it's not in the program, it's in the resolution or the motion.
Oh, okay.
And if, in that case, then that's why I just wanna make sure it doesn't get lost, cause I'm gonna just tell you the example for the facade grant the first change, before I got on the board, the year before, there was a change, and then the draft document didn't get updated, and it kinda got lost, until we figured it out a year and a half later. So because it was in the motion and not in the program, and anyways, I'm just trying to make it more clear, if it's not this document, I'm okay with that too. I do think we should add a bullet on, some programs that we do have authority to still, review and approve. But in addition to that, where do those things go when they're in the motion and not the program?
Well, if it is motioned, then the next step, after the meeting, then we would go back and say, we'd task out
Update the
between
document,
us,
yeah.
okay, this document needs to be updated,
So you
or,
put it in that makes
Yeah.
great sense.
but that's how I work, Bart.
Yeah, that's fine too.
That's operational.
I
Okay.
feel like with respect to your first point, saying that we're gonna abide by whatever is in our
Right.
documents is, I don't know, that seems like a given to me, I
But
guess.
then-
I mean, the document says we're gonna do this, do we really need to say in the bylaws that we're gonna follow what we said we would do in the various documents or various programs that we have?
Well, you say approval of development agreements,
Yeah, I think it's fine to add it
yeah, approval of programs.
for consistency. It doesn't hurt anything,
So it's sort of a general
Yeah.
catch-all that says.
as long as it's very general.
Do we have the wording? I think you said the wording just
If you could repeat that
Yeah.
one, that would be really
Okay,
great.
let's see.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's the wording.
I don't think we got to any wording.
Yeah,
Oh, I thought,
We might have to come back to it.
or we could come up with it now, it's just that I wanted to, yeah, I don't think there's any,
so that, but again, the spirit is that
or you guys can
we,
come up with something.
we will, it's, we will receive village board approval
With any recommended program,
as specified in
program document.
program documents and or meeting minutes, village board meeting minutes.
But in general, when the CDA creates a program
Mhm.
using TID funds, so we create TID 6, okay, let's just move forward here, we're moving for the future. In general, you're not gonna have a program that's gonna tell you that the village board approves that program.
That's
So,
a TID, so.
right, but it's like the facade grant, so say we did another TID 6, okay, and all of a sudden in TID 6 plan, it says, we are allowed to adopt, utilize funding, 'cause you have all the things that are applicable for project funding, and one of them is, any type of redevelopment program. So then we decide we wanna do a loan guarantee,
Okay.
alright? There's not a loan guarantee program document yet, but the village board would need to approve that if you're gonna use TID funding for that
Mhm.
program.
So
And
we
is
would
that-
recommend a program to the village board for
Right,
review and
so
approval.
you would put it under here, because that happens all the time, happened at the city all the time, we had Riverwalk programs. So you have a TID for the Riverwalks, and then you'd have the program come out of that, so you establish the boundary, and then the program would go to you would recommend the program to the village
Providing
board.
financial assistance out of the TID for,
Yeah, like in a program, so you're not doing,
Community
so you don't need each project approved separately, you're, as long as it falls under that program.
So then it's, then the change is specific to any new programs
Or-
the CDA wishes to adopt?
And modifications, right, like,
Well, modification,
that's why I was asking about the facade, because I think the only programs we have, they may have to go to the board anyways for changes,
we do.
right? So then it wouldn't, then that standard language would make sense, but I wanted that clarified before
I
I made
think
that
we're,
recommendation.
yeah, I see how that, anyway, I think the issue at hand here is when the CDA has an idea for a recommendation for using TID funds for additional community improvements.
Programs.
Yes, but I guess that's where, yeah, it may